Elena Hartley's hands trembled as she fastened the clasp on her grandmother's pearl necklace, the one heirloom she'd inherited after Gran passed 3 winters ago. The reflection staring back from her bedroom mirror looked composed enough. Emerald dress hugging her frame just right. Dark hair swept into loose waves. Makeup applied with the careful precision of someone who'd watched too many YouTube tutorials. But her eyes gave her away. They always did. Wide and uncertain, searching for some answer she couldn't quite name. 31 years old and still trying to figure out why love kept slipping through her fingers like sand. Her phone buzzed against the dresser, Rachel's name lighting up the screen with that particular brand of sisterly insistence. "Please tell me you're almost ready. Blake is already at Bellini's. He texted me 10 minutes ago." Elena pressed the phone to her ear, forcing brightness into her voice. "I'm walking out the door right now." "Good. And Elena, don't overthink this one. Blake is different. He's stable, successful, actually wants a relationship. This could be really good for you." The same thing Rachel had said about David, the same promises, different name. Elena's stomach tightened as she grabbed her clutch and headed for the door, her heels clicking against hardwood with each step. Outside, Richmond's December cold bit through her coat. Immediately, Christmas lights strung across neighboring porches, blurring into streaks of color as she blinked against the wind. Traffic crawled through downtown brake lights, painting the streets red, while holiday shoppers darted between cars with bags swinging from their arms. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, her knuckles white. She'd turned down Christmas Eve dinner with her parents for this. Her mother had sighed that particular way she did, the one that conveyed disappointment without words, and her father had simply nodded, already knowing whatever argument he might make would fall on deaf ears. Rachel meant well. She always did. But somewhere between her second marriage and her first baby, her younger sister had developed this unshakable conviction that Elena's singleness was a problem requiring immediate solution. As if love could be scheduled like a dental appointment, boxed up and delivered by someone who checked all the right boxes on paper. The memory of Jake surfaced unbidden as she turned onto Broad Street. 2 years of her life given to a man who'd been married the entire time, his wife and 2 kids living 3 counties over, while he spun elaborate stories about business trips and weekend conferences. She'd found out through Facebook, of all things. A mutual friend's comment on a family photo that shattered her entire reality in the time it took to scroll past. Then Connor, who'd seemed so promising at first. 6 months of casual dates that never quite evolved into anything deeper because he wasn't ready for commitment, but also really enjoyed spending time with her. She'd finally walked away when she realized she was auditioning for a role he had no intention of casting. David had been the worst, though, the one who'd actually made her believe in possibilities again. A year of building toward something real, talking about future plans, meeting each other's families. Right up until the morning, he'd sat her down at their favorite coffee shop and explained with genuine confusion in his voice that he just wasn't ready to settle down yet. 6 months later, his engagement announcement had appeared in her Instagram feed. To someone he'd met, dated, and proposed to in less time than he'd spent telling Elena he needed space to figure himself out. 3 strikes, 3 different men, same ending. Bellini's Italian restaurant rose before her, a converted brownstone with warm light spilling from tall windows and a striped awning fluttering in the December wind. She'd been here once before, years ago, for a friend's rehearsal dinner, back when she still believed wedding invitations would eventually include her own name. The memory tasted bitter. Inside, the hostess greeted her with professional warmth, already checking her reservation before Elena could speak. "Hartley table for 2. Your companion hasn't arrived yet, but I can seat you if you'd like." The words landed wrong. Elena checked her phone. Blake was supposed to be here already, according to Rachel. 10 minutes early, eager to meet her, all the promising signs. She forced a smile. "I'll wait, thank you." 5 minutes stretched into 10. The hostess kept glancing her way with increasing sympathy, the kind reserved for women standing alone in restaurants on Christmas Eve. Other couples streamed past, laughing and shaking snow from their coats, hands linked and eyes bright with the particular joy of the season. Elena's phone remained silent. When Blake finally pushed through the door 23 minutes late, she recognized him immediately from the photo Rachel had shown her. tall, athletic build, dark hair styled with the careful casualness of someone who spent time on their appearance. He wore gym clothes, athletic pants, and a quarter-zip fleece, and his expression held all the enthusiasm of someone showing up for a dental cleaning. Her stomach dropped. He spotted her and crossed the waiting area without apology, barely making eye contact as he stopped just short of where she stood. Up close, she could see the faint sheen of sweat still on his forehead, smell the lingering scent of whatever cologne he'd applied post-workout. "Elena, right." She nodded suddenly, very aware of the hours she'd spent on her makeup, the dress she'd chosen so carefully, the pearls that felt heavy around her neck. "Look, I'm just going to be straight with you because I don't believe in wasting people's time." The bottom fell out of her world before he even finished the sentence. She could see it coming the way you can see a car accident unfolding in slow motion, every detail crystallizing with horrible clarity. "My mom has been on me for months about settling down. She set this up through her friend, your sister, I guess, and she wouldn't let it go. I'm actually in a pretty serious relationship right now. Have been for about 8 months. I'm planning to propose after Christmas, already bought the ring and everything. But Mom wanted me to, quote, keep my options open before making such a big decision." He said it like he was explaining something reasonable, like Elena should understand, maybe even appreciate his honesty. The restaurant noise faded to a dull roar in her ears. "So I told her I'd come to one blind date just to get her off my back. And here we are. Sorry you got all dressed up for nothing. You seem nice and everything, but I'm not actually available. I just needed to check this box so I can tell Mom I tried." The words kept coming, but Elena had stopped processing them. She stood there in her emerald dress and grandmother's pearls in the middle of a crowded restaurant on Christmas Eve, being told she was an item on someone's obligation checklist. Not even worth a phone call to cancel, just a box to check before proposing to someone else. Blake shifted his weight, glancing at his phone. "Anyway, I'm going to take off. Got plans with my girlfriend tonight. Merry Christmas and all that." Then he was gone, pushing back through the door into the December night, leaving Elena frozen in place while the hostess pretended not to have witnessed the entire exchange. Around her, families laughed and clinked glasses. Children squealed with excitement over breadsticks and coloring menus. Couples leaned across tables, hands clasped, sharing that intimate space that comes from actually wanting to be together. And she stood alone, the common denominator in every failed relationship, every disappointed hope, every night spent wondering what fundamental flaw made her so easy to walk away from. The hostess approached with careful gentleness. "Would you still like your table?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena should leave, should get in her car, drive home, open a bottle of wine, and pretend this night never happened. But her legs wouldn't move. Some stubborn part of her refused to let Blake's casual cruelty win, refused to spend Christmas Eve alone in her apartment, replaying every moment that had led her here. "Yes, please." Table 7 sat near the back corner, positioned with a view of the main dining room, but separated enough to offer some illusion of privacy. The waiter appeared moments after she settled into her chair, his practiced smile faltering slightly when he realized she was alone. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Red wine, whatever you recommend." He nodded and disappeared, leaving Elena to study the menu without actually reading it. The chair across from her sat empty, a silent accusation. She'd told her family she had plans, had smiled when her mother asked if this was finally someone special, had believed despite everything that maybe Rachel was right this time. The wine arrived in a glass far too large, deep burgundy, catching the candlelight. Elena took a long sip, then another, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Around her, the restaurant pulsed with life. A family of 5 at the next table, youngest child maybe 3 years old, smearing marinara sauce across her face while her siblings argued over who got the last breadstick. 2 tables over, an elderly couple sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from decades together sharing a pizza and occasionally reaching across to touch each other's hands. Everyone belonged to someone, everyone except her. The tears built behind her eyes despite her best efforts, hot and insistent. She blinked rapidly, staring at the flickering candle in front of her like it held answers. This wasn't just about Blake. It was about Jake's wife, whose existence she'd never suspected. Connor's careful emotional distance that had made her feel crazy for wanting more. David's easy transition to someone else as if their year together had been nothing more than practice. It was about being 31 and feeling fundamentally unlovable. The waiter returned, hovering at the edge of her vision. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" Elena couldn't look at him, couldn't face the pity she knew would be written across his features. Her throat felt too tight to speak. She managed a small shake of her head, and he retreated, leaving her alone with her wine and her humiliation and the growing certainty that something was deeply, irreparably wrong with her. That's when she heard the small voice. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Elena looked down to find a little girl standing beside her table, maybe 5 years old, with wild blonde curls that stuck out in every direction and bright hazel eyes full of genuine concern. She wore a red velvet dress with white trim, and a small bow was sliding out of her hair half undone and listing to one side. For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. She tried to compose her face, tried to summon the teacher smile she used with her kindergartners, but her control was too fractured. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Thank you for asking." The little girl tilted her head, studying Elena with an intensity that felt almost adult. Her gaze took in the empty chair, the untouched menu, the desperate grip Elena had on her wine glass. "You look sad. My mommy used to say crying means you're brave enough to feel things, that it's okay to be sad sometimes, but you shouldn't be sad all by yourself. That makes it worse." The simple wisdom of it cracked something open in Elena's chest. A laugh escaped, watery and broken but genuine. She pressed her napkin to her eyes. Mascara be damned. "That's very wise advice. Your mommy sounds like a smart person." "She was the smartest. She's in heaven now watching over me and Daddy." The girl said it matter-of-factly, the way children do when they've accepted something incomprehensible. Then she brightened, pointing across the restaurant. "That's my Daddy over there. He's not very good at doing hair, but he makes really good pancakes on Saturdays, and he does funny voices when he reads bedtime stories." Elena followed the gesture and saw a man frozen in his seat 3 tables away, his face a mixture of mortification and concern. He stood quickly, nearly knocking over his water glass, and crossed toward them with long strides. Tall, probably mid-30s, with dark hair that needed a trim and kind eyes that held the particular exhaustion of single parenthood. "Clemmy, sweetheart, I am so sorry." He reached for the little girl's hand, his voice genuine with distress. "She has absolutely no concept of boundaries. I don't know where she gets it." "I do too have boundaries." Clemmy planted her hands on her hips, indignant. "I just don't like them. Boundaries are boring." Despite everything, despite Blake's cruelty and her smeared makeup and the weight of every failed relationship pressing down on her chest, Elena laughed. Really laughed. The sound surprised her. "Please don't apologize. She's wonderful." The man's shoulders relaxed fractionally, but before he could respond, Clemmy turned her attention back to Elena with renewed focus. "Daddy." She tugged on his sleeve with the persistence of someone who knew exactly how to get what she wanted. "The lady is all alone on Christmas Eve. That's really sad. Can we eat dinner with her? Please. Pretty please, with extra sprinkles." The man's face flushed red, and Elena could see him searching for the right words to extract them both from this situation with minimal embarrassment. But something in her didn't want them to leave. This little girl with her wild hair and her motherless wisdom had managed to break through the crushing loneliness in a way nothing else could. "It's okay." The words came out before Elena fully thought them through. "Really? You don't have to feel obligated." But Clemmy wasn't giving up. She looked at Elena with such earnest hope that refusing felt impossible. "Please, I can tell you about my Christmas list. I asked for a purple bicycle and also a dog, but Daddy says maybe on the dog. Maybe means probably not, but I'm still hoping." She leaned in, conspiratorial. "Also, Daddy gets lonely sometimes. I can tell because he sighs a lot when he thinks I'm not listening. Maybe you're both lonely and lonely people should eat together. That's just science." Elena looked at the man again, and something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps. An understanding that only people who'd known real loneliness could share. His eyes held grief, yes, but also something else. A flicker of hope, maybe. or just exhaustion at the thought of arguing with his daughter. He extended his hand, and Elena noticed the calluses on his fingers, the faint smudge of what might be ink or graphite on his thumb. "I'm Dominic Ashford, and this little negotiator is Clementine, but everyone calls her Clemmy. Except Grandma Thea when I'm in trouble," Clemmy added quickly. Then she says Clementine Rose Ashford in a really loud voice that means I probably shouldn't have put my toy cars in the washing machine. "That only happened once." Dominic's voice carried the practiced patience of someone who'd had this conversation before. "Twice. But the second time was an accident." Elena shook Dominic's hand, his grip warm and steady. "I'm Elena Hartley." Dominic hesitated, and Elena could see him weighing the decision, calculating the social awkwardness against his daughter's obvious determination. Then he smiled, a genuine kind smile that reached his eyes and softened the tired lines around them. "Would you like some company?" "No pressure at all, but I'm told the breadsticks here are the best in the whole wide world, and Clemmy has never been wrong about breadsticks." Elena looked at them, this earnest man with kind eyes and his irrepressible daughter in her red velvet dress, and felt something shift in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. I'd like that very much." Clemmy insisted on sitting between them, climbing into the chair Blake had vacated 30 minutes earlier, with the confidence of someone who'd just orchestrated a major diplomatic achievement. She immediately launched into a detailed explanation of why Rapunzel was obviously the best Disney princess, her hands gesturing wildly as she made her case. "She has the longest hair, which is basically a superpower, and also a chameleon named Pascal who changes colors and doesn't judge people. Plus she hits people with a frying pan when they're being mean, which is very practical." Dominic caught Elena's eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," over Clemmy's head, but Elena shook her head, smiling. The truth was, Clemmy's enthusiasm was exactly what she needed. A distraction from the humiliation still sitting heavy in her stomach, a reminder that joy existed somewhere in the world even on the worst nights. The waiter appeared, looking relieved to see Elena was no longer alone, and took their drink orders. Hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Clemmy, who insisted they be arranged in a snowman shape. Another glass of wine for Elena. Water for Dominic, who looked like he desperately needed something stronger, but was restraining himself. After they'd ordered breadsticks for the table as promised, along with pasta for Clemmy, chicken parmesan for Dominic, and lasagna for Elena, an awkward silence settled over them. Clemmy was busy rearranging her silverware into some pattern, only she understood, humming to herself. Dominic cleared his throat, his fingers drumming against the table in a nervous rhythm. "I know this is probably weird and you absolutely don't have to explain anything, but are you okay? That guy who left earlier?" Elena took a long sip of her wine, deciding honesty was easier than pretending. "Blind date. My sister set it up. He showed up 25 minutes late in gym clothes to tell me he's planning to propose to his girlfriend next week, but his mother made him come here first to, quote, keep his options open." She watched Dominic's jaw tighten, a muscle jumping near his temple. His hands curled into fists on the table before he consciously relaxed them. I don't even have words for how horrible that is. It's Christmas Eve." Elena heard her voice crack despite her best efforts. "I turned down dinner with my family for this. I actually thought—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. The wine was making her loose, stripping away the careful walls she usually maintained. "Sorry, you don't need to hear all this." "That man is a jerk-face," Clemmy declared with such conviction that both adults burst out laughing. "A big stupid jerk-face who deserves coal in his stocking." "Clemmy." Dominic tried to sound stern but failed. "We don't call people jerk-faces." "But he is one, Daddy. He made Miss Elena sad on Christmas Eve. That's what jerk-faces do. It's basically the definition." Dominic sighed, but Elena could see him fighting a smile. "You're not wrong, sweetheart, but we still can't say it out loud." "Can I think it really loud?" "Yes, you can think it as loud as you want." Clemmy seemed satisfied with this compromise. She reached across the table and patted Elena's hand with the solemnity of someone 3 times her age. "You're welcome. My daddy says good people shouldn't be sad, and you seem like a really good people." The breadsticks arrived, and Clemmy immediately grabbed one, declaring it the best in the whole wide world, exactly as she'd promised. Between bites, she peppered Elena with questions, her curiosity boundless and exhausting. "What's your favorite color?" "Green, like this dress." "Do you like dogs?" "I love dogs." "Do you think Daddy should let me get a dog?" Dominic interjected quickly. "Clemmy, you can't recruit strangers to your cause." "She's not a stranger anymore, Daddy. She's Miss Elena. That's totally different." Clemmy turned back to Elena, expectant. "So dogs are good, right?" "Dogs are very good," Elena agreed carefully. "But they're also a lot of responsibility. You have to feed them and walk them and clean up after them." "I'm very responsible. I brush my teeth almost every night." "Almost." "Sometimes I fall asleep first, but that's not my fault." Elena found herself relaxing for the first time all evening, the tight knot in her chest loosening incrementally. There was something disarming about Clemmy's unfiltered enthusiasm, something healing about Dominic's quiet kindness. He didn't push for more information about her disastrous date, didn't offer platitudes or unwanted advice. He just let her breathe. When their entrees arrived, the conversation flowed more naturally. Dominic asked about her work, and Elena explained she taught kindergarten at Riverside Elementary 4th year, now loved it, despite the chaos and the constant runny noses and the way her classroom always smelled faintly of paste and crayons. His face lit up at that. "Really, Clemmy starts kindergarten next fall. She's already practicing her letters." "I can write my whole name," Clemmy announced proudly, barely pausing in her assault on her pasta. "Clementine. It's a very long name, but I'm very good at it." "That's impressive," Elena said genuinely. Most kids Clemmy's age were still working on their first names, often mixing up letters or writing them backward. "You must practice a lot." "Grandma Thea helps me. She says I get my smartness from my mommy." Clemmy took another bite of pasta, completely matter of fact. "Mommy was an architect like Daddy. She designed buildings and made them beautiful. Daddy says she made everything beautiful." Elena saw something flash across Dominic's face. Pain quickly hidden but sharp enough to leave marks. She didn't press, sensing there was a story there. He wasn't ready to tell a stranger in a restaurant. Instead, she asked Clemmy about her favorite books, and the little girl launched into an elaborate summary of a story about a dragon who was afraid of fire. Dominic jumped in occasionally to correct timeline details, his interjections gentle and amused, and Elena found herself genuinely enjoying the chaos of their dynamic. The way Clemmy dominated the conversation while Dominic provided quiet commentary. The way his hand automatically moved to steady Clemmy's water glass when she gestured too wildly. The way he looked at his daughter like she was the entire universe compressed into one small, wild-haired package. When Clemmy excused herself to go to the bathroom, Dominic supervising from a distance near the restroom entrance, Elena sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. An hour ago she'd been on the verge of breaking down in public. Now she was laughing. Actually laughing. How had this happened? Dominic returned with Clemmy, who had somehow convinced him to let her get dessert, despite his initial protests about sugar before bedtime. "Just a small one. It's Christmas Eve. We can break the rules a little." "Rules are made to be broken," Clemmy said wisely. "Grandma Thea says that all the time." "Grandma Thea says that when she sneaks you extra cookies, not as a life philosophy." Elena found herself telling them about her family. Her younger sister Rachel, who meant well but was constantly trying to fix Elena's love life, treating it like a project that just needed the right approach. Her parents, who still lived in Charlottesville and seemed perpetually surprised that their older daughter was 31 and unmarried, as if they'd somehow expected her to follow a script she'd never agreed to. She told them about her students, about the little boy who insisted on bringing his pet rock to show and tell every single week, convinced it was secretly alive and just very good at playing dead. About the girl who'd announced to the entire class that her mom had a special friend who came over when her dad was at work, forcing Elena into an uncomfortable conversation with the school counselor. Dominic shared that he was an architect specializing in commercial renovation projects. He'd recently finished a design for a downtown bookstore conversion, turning an old warehouse into something functional and beautiful. He talked about his mother Thea, who'd moved from Tennessee after his wife died, leaving behind her own life to help him raise Clemmy. He was careful, Elena noticed, not to mention his wife directly beyond that single reference, though her absence was loud in the gaps. The way Clemmy spoke about her mother in present tense memory. The way Dominic's eyes dimmed whenever the subject brushed too close to whatever grief he carried. 2 hours passed, then 3. Clemmy eventually started to fade, her endless energy finally hitting its limit. Her eyelids drooped between bites of tiramisu. "I'm not tired," she insisted even as her head nodded forward. "I'm just resting my eyelids for a minute." Dominic smiled softly, the expression transforming his entire face. "I think that's our cue. We should probably get this little one home before she falls asleep in her dessert." Elena felt a pang of disappointment sharp enough to surprise her. She wasn't ready for the evening to end, wasn't ready to go back to her empty apartment and the reality waiting there. But she nodded, reaching for her purse. "Of course. Thank you for joining me, for saving my Christmas Eve. I think Clemmy deserves the credit. She's the brave one." They paid the bill, Dominic insisting on covering everything despite Elena's protests, and made their way to the parking lot. Clemmy was fully awake again now that they were outside, running ahead to look at the Christmas lights strung along the restaurant's exterior, her breath forming white clouds in the December air. "She's really special," Elena said quietly, watching the little girl twirl under the light's arms outstretched, like she could catch the brightness. "She is." Dominic's voice held so much love, so much pride, that Elena felt her chest tighten. "She saved me, honestly. After my wife passed away 3 years ago, Clemmy was only 2. I don't know how I would have survived without her. Some days I still don't know." The pieces clicked into place. The careful way he talked about Clemmy's mother. The flash of pain when Clemmy mentioned her. The single dad doing his best with wild hair and bedtime negotiations, and a daughter who approached strangers in restaurants. "I'm so sorry." "It was—" Dominic paused, searching for words. "It still is some days. But Clemmy makes it easier. She makes everything easier. She's got her mother's fearlessness, her inability to see strangers, just people who haven't become friends yet." He turned to look at Elena, his expression earnest in the glow of the Christmas lights. "I know this is probably weird, and please don't feel obligated, but would it be too forward if I asked for your number?" "Not in a weird way. I'd like to see you again, if you're open to it." Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest, unexpected and fragile. "I'd like that too." They exchanged numbers, fingers fumbling with cold, and something else, something neither of them was quite ready to name. Dominic walked her to her car, Clemmy skipping ahead and then circling back, unable to contain her energy despite the late hour. At Elena's car, Clemmy insisted on giving her a hug goodbye, wrapping her small arms around Elena's waist with surprising strength. She had to bend down to accommodate the height difference, and Clemmy whispered directly into her ear. "I'm really glad we found you. You have a nice smile. You should smile more." Elena's eyes stung with fresh tears, but these were different. Better. "I'm glad you found me too, Clemmy. Very glad." She straightened and met Dominic's gaze over his daughter's head. In the parking lot lights, she could see the same fragile hope she felt reflected in his expression. Two people who'd learned to expect disappointment, daring to wonder if maybe this time could be different. As Elena drove home that night, she kept replaying the evening in her mind. Blake's cruelty, her despair, and then Clemmy's small voice asking if she was okay. Dominic's kindness. 3 hours of genuine connection with people who owed her nothing but gave her everything she needed in that moment. She'd walked into Bellini's expecting nothing and left with what hope? Possibility. The phone number of a widowed architect and his fearless daughter saved in her contacts. She wasn't sure yet what any of it meant, but for the first time in a long time she was excited to find out. The city lights blurred past her windows. Christmas decorations painting the streets in red and green and gold. Somewhere Blake was probably with his girlfriend, having successfully checked his mother's box and moved on without a second thought. Somewhere Rachel was probably tucking her kids into bed, satisfied that she'd done her sisterly duty and setting up yet another date. Somewhere her parents were cleaning up from Christmas Eve dinner, the empty chair at the table a silent marker of Elena's absence. But Elena wasn't thinking about any of them. She was thinking about a little girl who'd seen a stranger crying and decided loneliness was a problem worth solving. About a man who'd raised his daughter to be brave enough to care about people she didn't know. About the way Dominic's hand had felt when he'd shaken hers, steady and warm and real. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into her apartment complex, Dominic's name lighting up the screen. She sat in her car with the engine running, heat blasting against the December cold, and opened the message. Clemmy wanted me to tell you that you're officially her favorite person she met today, which is saying something because we went to the zoo this morning and she met a penguin named Gerald. Also, I wanted to say thank you for not running away when my boundaryless daughter approached you, for staying, for making what could have been a sad Christmas Eve into something good. I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I'm really glad Clemmy saw you. Really glad. Elena read the message 3 times, a smile spreading across her face that felt genuine for the first time in months. She typed her response carefully, deleting and rewriting until she found the right words. Tell Clemmy she's my favorite person I met today too, and I'm sorry, but she definitely beats Gerald the penguin. Thank you for joining me, for reminding me that kindness still exists. I'm glad she saw me too. Merry Christmas, Dominic. She sent it before she could overthink, then sat in her car watching the cursor blink, wondering if he'd respond right away or wait until tomorrow. The answer came 30 seconds later. Merry Christmas, Elena. Sleep well. 2 simple sentences, but they carried weight. Elena saved the message, tucked her phone into her purse, and finally turned off her car. Her apartment would still be empty when she walked inside. The bottle of wine she'd planned to drink alone would still be waiting. Tomorrow she'd still have to face her family's questions about how the date went. But something had shifted. Some fundamental belief about her own unworthiness had cracked, letting in a sliver of light. Because if someone like Clemmy could see her across a crowded restaurant and decide she was worth approaching, worth caring about, worth including, then maybe Elena wasn't as broken as she'd believed. Maybe she'd just been sitting at the wrong tables, waiting for the wrong people, hoping for love from those who were never going to offer it. Maybe the answer wasn't fixing whatever was wrong with her, but recognizing that nothing had been wrong in the first place. Just bad timing, bad choices, bad luck. And maybe, just maybe, her luck was finally changing. Christmas morning arrived with that particular quality of light that only winter can produce, pale and clean and full of promise. Elena woke to her phone buzzing on the nightstand, Dominic's name appearing alongside an image that made her smile before she'd even fully opened her eyes. Clemmy stood beside a purple bicycle in what looked like their living room helmet already strapped on, grinning so wide her face seemed made entirely of joy. The message below read, Santa delivered. Clemmy wanted me to tell you immediately. She's been awake since 5:47 a.m. and has already ridden circles around the coffee table 16 times. Merry Christmas, Elena. She typed back quickly, still smiling. Please tell her that's the most beautiful purple bicycle I've ever seen. Merry Christmas to you both. The response came faster than she expected. She says you have to come see it in person. I told her that's probably not how Christmas morning works, but she's very persuasive. No pressure, obviously. Just know that you've been formally invited by a 6-year-old bicycle enthusiast. Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, weighing the invitation against the reality waiting at her parents' house in Charlottesville. Rachel would be there with her husband and kids, probably already rehearsing her questions about last night's date. Her mother would hover with that particular brand of concerned disapproval she'd perfected over the years. Her father would retreat to his study, uncomfortable with emotional conversations, leaving the women to navigate the minefield without him. She texted Dominic back. Tell Clemmy I'd love to see it. What time works for you? 20 minutes later, she was in her car, heading toward the address he'd sent, a quiet neighborhood in the museum district where old houses sat behind mature trees and Christmas decorations competed for prominence. Dominic's place turned out to be a renovated craftsman with a wide front porch and shutters that needed paint. The yard held evidence of Clemmy's presence. A forgotten soccer ball sidewalk, chalk drawings faded by weather. A small plastic slide tilted at an angle near the fence. Clemmy answered the door before Elena could knock, still wearing her helmet, her face flushed with excitement. "You came. Daddy said you might be busy, but I knew you'd come. Want to see my bike? It has streamers and a bell and everything." She grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her inside where Dominic stood in the entryway holding a coffee mug and looking slightly overwhelmed. He'd changed from last night's dress shirt into jeans and a faded Virginia Tech sweatshirt, his hair still damp from a shower. "I tried to tell her you probably had family plans, but she was very insistent." "I can hear you, Daddy. And Miss Elena is here, so I was right." The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls, warm and lived in. Clemmy led Elena on a comprehensive tour of the bicycle's features, explaining each component with the seriousness of a car salesman. The streamers were purple to match the frame. The bell made a sound like a real bell, not one of those fake ding-dings. The seat had a cushion because regular bicycle seats hurt your bottom after a while. Elena crouched down to Clemmy's level, inspecting each detail with appropriate gravity. Behind them, Dominic leaned against the doorframe watching, and when Elena glanced back, she caught something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not just gratitude that she'd shown up, but something deeper. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. An older woman appeared from what Elena assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had Dominic's eyes and silver hair cut in a practical bob, her expression assessing but not unkind. "You must be Elena. I'm Thea, Dominic's mother. Clemmy hasn't stopped talking about you since they got home last night." They shook hands, and Elena felt herself being evaluated in that way mothers do, taking inventory of everything from her posture to the way she'd crouched to talk to Clemmy. Whatever conclusion Thea reached remained hidden behind a polite smile. "Would you like some coffee? We have cinnamon rolls fresh from the oven." Elena ended up staying for 2 hours sitting at their kitchen table while Clemmy demonstrated her bicycle riding skills in the living room, and Dominic explained apologetically that the hardwood floors were already scratched beyond salvation, so a few more wouldn't hurt. Thea asked careful questions about her teaching job, her family, her plans for the day. Nothing too invasive, but enough to sketch the outline of who Elena was and what she might want from her son. When Elena finally left, promising Clemmy she'd see her soon, Dominic walked her to her car. The December sun had burned off the morning frost, leaving the day crisp and bright. "Thank you for coming. You didn't have to, but it meant a lot to Clemmy, to both of us." Elena found herself standing closer to him than strictly necessary, aware of the few inches between them in a way that made her hyper-conscious of her own body. "I wanted to. Last night it helped, more than you probably realize. I'd like to see you again. Really see you, I mean. Not just a chance encounter orchestrated by my daughter's lack of boundaries." He smiled, but there was nervousness underneath it. "Would you want to get coffee sometime this week, just us?" The yes came easily, without the usual anxiety that accompanied new possibilities. They made plans for December 27th at a cafe near the James River, and Elena drove to Charlottesville with something warm settling in her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. The coffee date stretched into 3 hours of conversation that ranged from inconsequential to profound, without awkward transitions. Dominic told her about meeting Annalise in college, an architecture studio where they'd been paired for a project and ended up building something more than just scale models. How they'd started their firm together right out of grad school, working from a converted garage until they'd saved enough to rent actual office space. He told her about the diagnosis delivered on an ordinary Tuesday morning that had started like any other. Autoimmune disease with a name Elena couldn't pronounce, attacking Annalise's organs one by one while they tried every treatment available. 8 months of fighting that had ultimately changed nothing except how much time they'd had to say goodbye. She was so strong even at the end. Thinking about Clemmy, making sure I knew how to braid her hair, what songs she liked before bed, how to handle the nightmares. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten between his hands. She made me promise I'd keep living, that I wouldn't just shut down and go through the motions. I don't know if I've kept that promise very well. Elena reached across the table and took his hand without thinking, the gesture feeling natural despite how new this all was. "You're here. You're trying. That counts for something." He looked at their joined hands like he was surprised to find them there, but he didn't pull away. The first year was just survival, getting through each day, making sure Clemmy was okay. Mom moved in, which helped, but I was so angry. At everything. At the universe, at myself, for not being able to fix it, at Annalise for leaving, even though I knew that was irrational. That's not irrational. It's human. Maybe. But it wasn't fair to Clemmy. She'd lost her mother and she needed her father, and I was just hollow. But she kept pulling me back. She'd ask me to read stories, to play tea party, to watch cartoons. And eventually I started to feel things again. Started to remember what joy felt like. Elena told him about her string of failed relationships, the pattern she couldn't seem to break. Men who were emotionally unavailable or dishonest or simply not interested in building anything lasting. She told him about Blake and the humiliation of Christmas Eve, though now with distance it felt less devastating and more absurd. I was starting to think I was the problem. That maybe I was asking for too much or expecting things that don't exist in real life. Dominic's grip on her hand tightened. You're not the problem. Trust me on that. Those men were idiots who couldn't recognize what was right in front of them. That's kind of you to say? It's not kind. It's true. They left the cafe only when the barista started giving them pointed looks about closing time, walking to their cars in the dimming afternoon light. The temperature had dropped, their breath visible in white clouds, and Dominic's hand found hers again as they crossed the parking lot. Can I see you again soon? Elena didn't hesitate. Yes, please. January bled into February in a blur of dinners and park visits and slow, careful steps toward something neither of them wanted to name too quickly. Elena became a fixture in their lives, showing up for Tuesday night pasta and Saturday morning pancakes, helping Clemmy practice her letters, and listening to Dominic's frustrations about difficult clients. Thea remained polite but distant, watching their interactions with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. It was during a Thursday evening in mid-February that Elena first noticed the tension in Dominic's shoulders, the way he kept checking his phone with increasing frequency. They were at his place, Clemmy already in bed after an exhausting day at preschool, and he'd been distracted all evening. Everything okay? He set his phone down with more force than necessary. Client pulled out of a project today. Big renovation downtown that was supposed to carry us through the summer. They went with a larger firm instead, someone with more name recognition. Elena moved closer on the couch, close enough that their knees touched. I'm sorry. That's frustrating. It's more than frustrating. It's the third client we've lost in 4 months. He ran his hands through his hair, the gesture conveying exhaustion. The firm has been struggling since Annalise died. She was the visionary, the one who could walk into a space and see what it wanted to become. I just execute the plans. Without her, we're hemorrhaging money and clients, and I don't know how to stop it. This was new information delivered with the weight of something he'd been carrying alone for too long. Elena reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. What does that mean practically? It means I might have to close the firm within the year if things don't turn around. Lay off my 2 remaining staff members, dissolve the partnership, get a job with someone else's company. His voice carried defeat. It means admitting that what Annalise and I built doesn't work without her. Elena didn't offer empty reassurances. She just held his hand and let him feel what he needed to feel, the silence between them comfortable enough to contain grief and fear and uncertainty without requiring immediate solutions. The next day, Dominic's brother Preston called. Elena was at the elementary school when it happened, teaching a lesson on basic addition with counting bears, but Dominic told her about it that night over the phone. Preston ran a successful real estate development company in Atlanta, the kind of operation that turned struggling neighborhoods into luxury condos, and measured success in quarterly earnings reports. He'd heard about the firm's troubles through their mother and had a proposal. He'd buy out Dominic's share, absorb the client list, convert the whole operation into a subsidiary of his own company. Dominic would become a salaried employee, give up creative control but gain financial stability. A steady paycheck, health insurance, a 401k. Security for Clemmy's future. What did you tell him? That I'd think about it. Dominic's voice sounded hollow through the phone. It's a good offer, generous even. Preston knows I'm desperate and he's not taking advantage. This would solve all my immediate problems. But it means giving up on everything Annalise and I dreamed about. It means admitting I can't do this on my own." Elena lay in her bed staring at the ceiling phone pressed to her ear, choosing her words carefully. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. The responsible choice is to take Preston's offer. Make sure Clemmy's college fund stays intact, that we're not one emergency away from financial disaster. But there's this part of me that feels like I'd be betraying Annalise's memory if I just sold everything we built." "Have you talked to anyone else about this? Your mom?" "Mom thinks I should take it. She's worried about stability, about what happens to Clemmy if the firm collapses and I'm left with nothing." He paused, and Elena could hear the exhaustion underneath his words. "Sometimes I think everyone would be better off if I just accepted that I'm not cut out for this, that I was only ever half of a whole, and the important half is gone." The words hit Elena harder than she expected, revealing a depth of self-doubt she hadn't fully recognized before. "Dominic, that's not true. Isn't it? Look at the evidence. I can't keep clients. I can't manage the business side. I can barely keep the lights on. What kind of architect can't even sustain his own firm?" Elena wanted to argue, to tell him he was being too hard on himself, but she also knew this wasn't a problem she could solve with reassurance. This was grief tangled up with professional crisis identity, tied to loss, and wading into it without understanding all the currents could do more harm than good. "I think whatever you decide will be the right choice because you're making it for the right reasons. For Clemmy, for yourself. That matters more than some abstract idea of what you should do." They talked for another hour, the conversation circling around his fears and options without landing on any firm conclusions. When they finally hung up, Elena lay awake wondering how she'd become so invested in his happiness so quickly, how this man and his daughter had woven themselves into her life in barely 2 months. March arrived with the first hints of spring dogwoods beginning to bud and temperatures creeping above freezing during the day. Dominic hadn't made a decision about Preston's offer, letting it hang over him like a sword on a thread while he tried to drum up new business. Elena helped where she could, proofreading proposals and offering opinions on design presentations, though she knew her kindergarten teaching background provided limited practical value. It was Clemmy who stumbled onto the portfolio quite literally when a box fell from the closet shelf while she was searching for a board game. Dominic called Elena that evening, his voice strange, tight with emotion she couldn't identify. "Can you come over? There's something I need to show you." She found him in his home office, a converted spare bedroom where drafting tables competed with filing cabinets for floor space. Spread across every surface were sketches and renderings, some in Annalise's handwriting, others in Dominic's, all focused on a single project. A community arts center, modern and open, with large windows and flexible spaces designed to serve underserved neighborhoods. Annalise started working on this about 6 months before she got sick. She wanted to design something that actually mattered, something beyond commercial projects and private renovations. Dominic's hands moved over the papers with reverence. She spent months researching community needs, talking to local artists and musicians, figuring out what was missing. This was going to be her masterpiece, our masterpiece. We were going to pitch it to the city council together. Elena studied the sketches, seeing the vision even in rough form. Annalise had been talented, that much was clear. The designs balanced aesthetics with function, beauty with accessibility. "Why didn't you finish it?" "After she died, I couldn't even look at this stuff. It hurt too much, reminded me of all the conversations we'd had about it, all the plans we'd made, so I boxed it up and tried to forget about it." He picked up a rendering one that showed the center at sunset with people streaming through the doors. "But maybe that was a mistake. Maybe this is exactly what I should be doing instead of chasing corporate renovations that don't mean anything." Elena heard the dangerous edge of hope in his voice, the fragile possibility that he might have found a path forward. But she also saw the practical problems immediately. This kind of project requires funding, city approval, time you don't have if the firm is bleeding money. "I know. It's probably impossible. Preston's offer is still the smart choice." But Elena could see him falling in love with the idea anyway, his architect's mind already working through modifications and updates to Annalise's original vision. She recognized the look because she'd seen it on her students' faces when they discovered something that sparked their imagination, that made them forget about recess and snack time in favor of finishing whatever project had captured them. The conversation with Thea happened 3 days later, unexpected and uncomfortable. Elena had stopped by to pick up Clemmy for an afternoon at the park, a routine they'd established over the past month when Thea intercepted her at the door. "Do you have a moment? I'd like to talk. Just the two of us." They sat in Thea's car, parked at a coffee shop neither of them had suggested, going into the engine off, and silence stretching between them. Elena waited, hands folded in her lap, while Thea seemed to be organizing her thoughts. "I'm not trying to be unkind when I say this, but I need to be honest with you. Are you ready for what being with Dominic actually means?" The question landed with more force than Elena had expected. "I'm not sure I understand. He's not just a single man you're dating. He comes with a 5-year-old daughter who's already incredibly attached to you. He comes with a business that's failing and might take everything we have with it. He comes with grief that he's still processing, a dead wife he loved completely, and a mother-in-law who watches everything he does like a hawk." Thea's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "He comes with complexity and baggage and a life that's already full of obligations. If you're not certain this is what you want, if there's any part of you that's just testing the waters or seeing where things go, you need to walk away now. Before Clemmy gets hurt, before Dominic gets hurt, before everyone's too invested to untangle it cleanly." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You think I'm going to leave? I think you're 31 years old with no kids and a whole life ahead of you. I think dating a widowed single father with a failing business isn't what most women your age sign up for. And I think if you're going to realize that and walk away, better now than 6 months from now when Clemmy will be completely devastated." The words struck at every insecurity Elena had spent years trying to ignore. Every failed relationship, every man who'd decided she wasn't worth the effort, every night spent wondering what fundamental flaw made her so easy to discard. And now here was Thea essentially asking if Elena was going to do the same thing to Dominic that had been done to her so many times. "I care about them. Both of them. I'm sure you do, right now. But caring isn't the same as being ready for this life. And I've watched Dominic rebuild himself over the past 3 years. I've seen how hard he's worked to be present for Clemmy, to keep the firm running, to honor Annalise's memory while still moving forward. I can't watch him fall apart again because someone decided they weren't ready for what being with him actually requires." Elena wanted to argue to defend herself and her intentions, but part of her recognized the truth underneath Thea's words. Was she ready for this? She'd never dated someone with a child before, never navigated the complexities of grief and memory and co-parenting with a ghost, never considered what it meant to love someone who'd already built a complete life with someone else. They parted without clear resolution. Thea returning to the house while Elena sat alone in the coffee shop parking lot trying to steady her breathing. The afternoon with Clemmy passed in a blur, the little girl chattering about everything and nothing, while Elena smiled and nodded and wondered if Thea was right. That evening she kept her distance from Dominic, claiming exhaustion from a long week of parent-teacher conferences. She needed space to think, to examine her own motivations without his presence clouding her judgment. The zoo trip was Dominic's idea, a Saturday in mid-March when the weather had finally decided to commit to spring. Elena almost canceled Thea's words, still echoing in her mind, but Clemmy had been talking about it all week, and disappointing her felt impossible. They wandered through exhibits while Clemmy provided running commentary on each animal's apparent personality and life choices. The monkeys were clearly troublemakers. The elephants were wise and thoughtful. The flamingos were show-offs who stood on one leg just to prove they could. At the penguin exhibit, Clemmy pressed her face against the glass, watching 2 penguins waddle side by side across the rocks with their flippers occasionally brushing. "Look, they're holding flippers just like you and Miss Elena hold hands." Elena glanced down and realized Dominic's hand had found hers at some point during their walk, their fingers interlaced without conscious decision. The gesture had become so natural over the past weeks that she'd stopped noticing when it happened. Clemmy turned around, her expression serious. "Penguins mate for life, you know. They find one penguin and stay together forever and ever. Are you and Daddy going to mate for life? Dominic's hand tightened around Elena's and she could feel the tension radiating through him. This was too much. Too soon. Too complicated. They'd been dating for barely 3 months. She'd never even met his extended family. And here was Clemmy in her innocent wisdom asking questions neither adult was ready to answer. "Sweetie, that's not really—" Dominic started, but Clemmy was already moving to the next exhibit, her attention captured by a sleeping lion. They didn't talk about it directly, but the question hung between them for the rest of the afternoon. Elena felt it in the way Dominic kept looking at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, in the careful distance he maintained when they returned to his car. On the drive back, with Clemmy dozing in her car seat, he finally spoke. "I'm sorry about what she said. She doesn't understand how relationships actually work. She's just being honest. Kids are good at that. Still, I don't want you to feel pressured. We're taking this at whatever pace works for both of us." But Elena heard the unspoken question underneath his reassurance. The same question Thea had posed in her more confrontational way. "Are you in this? Really in this? Or are you still keeping one foot out the door, ready to run when it gets too complicated?" She didn't know how to answer, so she said nothing, and the silence between them felt heavier than it should have. April brought the first real crisis, though it started small. Elena had plans to stay over at Dominic's after a late dinner, the first time they'd planned for her to be there overnight. Clemmy knew had helped her pick out which pajamas to pack, had been excited about making pancakes together in the morning. But at 2 a.m, Elena woke to the sound of screaming, not the startled cry of a nightmare, but full-throated terror that turned her blood cold. She found Dominic already in Clemmy's room, holding his daughter, while she thrashed and sobbed, calling for her mommy over and over in a voice that didn't sound quite awake. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here. You're safe." But Clemmy wasn't hearing him, trapped in whatever nightmare had captured her. Her eyes were open, but unseeing tears streaming down her face, body rigid with fear Elena couldn't begin to understand. Dominic looked up and saw her in the doorway, his own face pale and helpless. "I don't know what to do. This hasn't happened in months. I thought we were past this." Elena moved closer, instinct overriding uncertainty, and reached out to stroke Clemmy's hair. The little girl's head whipped toward her, and for a moment Elena thought she was breaking through. But instead, Clemmy recoiled, pressing herself against Dominic with renewed desperation. "You're not my mommy. I want my real mommy. Where's my mommy?" The words hit like physical blows, each one stripping away another layer of Elena's composure. She stepped back, hands shaking, while Dominic tried to soothe his daughter with soft words and gentle rocking. But Clemmy kept crying, kept calling for someone who couldn't answer, and Elena felt herself fracturing. This was what Thea had warned her about. The complexity, the grief, the reality that she was trying to build something in a space already occupied by memory and loss. She couldn't replace Annalise, couldn't be Clemmy's mother, no matter how much they all might want her to fit into that role. She was an outsider trying to wedge herself into a family that had already been complete before tragedy shattered it. Elena turned and left the room, made it halfway down the stairs before the tears started. She heard Dominic call her name, but she kept moving, grabbing her bag from the guest room and heading for the door. He caught up with her in the driveway, barefoot and desperate. "Elena, please. Wait." She didn't mean it. She was having a nightmare. She wasn't thinking clearly. She meant it. Elena's voice cracked, but she forced the words out anyway. "She wants her mother, her real mother, and I can't be that. I've been fooling myself thinking I could just step into this family and everything would work out, but Thea was right. I'm not ready for this. I can't do this. Don't let one bad night undo everything we've built. It's not one bad night, Dominic. It's reality catching up with whatever fantasy we've been living. Clemmy lost her mother and she needs you, and I'm just complicating things, making it harder for her to process her grief because she's confused about who I am and what role I'm supposed to play." Dominic's hands found her shoulders, his grip gentle but insistent. "You're not complicating anything. You're helping. Both of us. Clemmy adores you. One nightmare doesn't change that." But Elena shook her head, pulling away. "I need time. to think, to figure out if I'm actually capable of being what you both need. I can't just keep showing up and hoping it works out without understanding what I'm really signing up for." She got in her car before he could respond, pulling out of the driveway with tears blurring her vision. In her rear-view mirror, she saw him standing in the street lit by the single street lamp, looking exactly like what he was, a man who'd already lost too much and was watching something else slip away. 2 weeks passed with minimal contact. Elena sent a few texts, checking on Clemmy, keeping her messages brief and neutral. Dominic responded with equal restraint, giving her the space she'd asked for, even though she could feel the hurt underneath his carefully chosen words. At school, she threw herself into end-of-year planning, staying late to organize her classroom and prepare activities for the final weeks before summer break. Rachel called twice, having somehow heard through the family grapevine that Elena was dating someone. She wanted details, wanted to know why Elena hadn't mentioned it earlier, wanted to help however she could. Elena deflected and eventually stopped answering, unable to explain something she didn't fully understand herself. On a Tuesday night in late April, her phone rang at 9:30. Dominic's name on the screen, the late hour, suggesting something wrong. She answered with her heart already racing. "Elena, I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know what else to do." His voice sounded wrecked, stripped of its usual careful control. "Clemmy woke up with another nightmare. Worse than last time. She's asking for you. She won't calm down, and I've tried everything, and she keeps saying she needs to see Miss Elena. I know you asked for space, and I respect that, but please, can you come?" Elena was already grabbing her keys, not letting herself think about what this meant or whether responding was a good idea. 20 minutes later, she was back at Dominic's house, following him upstairs to where Clemmy sat in bed surrounded by stuffed animals, her face blotchy from crying. The little girl saw Elena and immediately reached out, her small voice breaking. "I'm sorry I yelled at you. I didn't mean it. I was scared and I wanted my mommy, but I didn't want you to leave. Please don't leave me like Mommy did." Elena crossed the room and pulled Clemmy into her arms, holding her, while the little girl sobbed against her shoulder. Over Clemmy's head, she met Dominic's eyes and saw her own realization reflected back. This wasn't just about whether Elena was ready. It was about whether she could walk away from people who needed her, who'd let her into their broken family, and were asking her to help make it whole again. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Clemmy eventually cried herself to sleep, still holding on to Elena's hand. Dominic and Elena sat on opposite sides of the bed, both afraid to move and wake her. When Clemmy's breathing finally evened out into true sleep, they carefully extracted themselves and moved to the hallway. Dominic leaned against the wall, exhaustion written into every line of his body. "I'm sorry for calling you, for putting you in this position. I just didn't know what else to do." "I'm glad you called." Elena surprised herself with how much she meant it. "I've been running scared, letting Thea's words get in my head and convince me I wasn't capable of this. But hearing Clemmy tonight, seeing how much she needed, I realized something." "What?" "That I was so focused on whether I could be what you needed that I forgot to ask myself what I actually wanted. And what I want is to be here, with both of you. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because that's what love actually is. Not the easy parts, but showing up for the difficult parts too." Dominic pushed off the wall and closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I've been terrified of this. Of letting myself fall in love again, of risking what it means to open up after losing everything. But you make it feel possible. You make me want to try." When he kissed her, gentle and careful, Elena felt something settle into place that had been off-kilter since Thea's intervention. This wasn't about being ready or having all the answers. It was about choosing each other, complications and grief and uncertainty included, and believing that together they could figure out the rest. They talked until dawn, sitting in Dominic's kitchen while coffee grew cold and the first light crept through the windows. He told her about finding Annalise's portfolio, about the impossible dream of the Arts Center, about Preston's offer sitting on his desk like a ticking clock. She told him about her fears, about the pattern of failed relationships that had convinced her she was the problem, about how terrifying it was to want something this much. "I'm going to turn down Preston's offer. The words came out steady, certain. I'm going to pitch Annalise's Art Center to the city council. I'm going to fail, probably, but I need to try. I need to prove to myself that I can build something meaningful instead of just going through the motions of existing. Elena reached across the table and took his hand. Then let me help. I don't know anything about architecture or city planning, but I can research grants, help you prepare presentations, be there when you need someone to tell you you're not crazy for trying. You'd do that? I'd do more than that. I'm in this, Dominic, fully in this. With you and Clemmy and whatever chaos comes with it. The smile that spread across his face transformed him, erasing years of grief and worry, leaving behind something younger and hopeful and entirely focused on her. They stayed at that table as morning broke, fully making plans and drinking terrible coffee, and Elena felt the last pieces of her doubt dissolve into certainty. This was what she'd been searching for in all those failed relationships. Not perfection or ease, but genuine connection with someone willing to be vulnerable, to let her see his broken places and trust her not to turn away. And in return, she could offer her own broken places, her own fears, and know they'd be held with care. When Clemmy woke hours later, she found them still in the kitchen, and her face lit up with joy, so pure it hurt to witness. She climbed into Elena's lap without asking, settling there like she belonged, and announced that they absolutely had to have pancakes for breakfast because it was a special day. Why is it special? Because you came back, and that means you're staying forever, right? Elena looked at Dominic over Clemmy's wild curls, seeing her own emotions mirrored in his expression. Forever was a big word, one that carried weight and promise and risk. But sitting there with his daughter in her arms and his hand warm against her knee forever didn't sound scary. It sounded exactly right. Right, her voice steady, more resolve than hope. I'm staying. May arrived with the kind of warmth that made Richmond forget winter ever existed, magnolias blooming along Monument Avenue and the James River shimmering under cloudless skies. Dominic spent every spare moment refining Annalise's Art Center design, updating code requirements and accessibility standards, reshaping her vision for the reality of current regulations and available funding. Elena watched him come alive in ways she hadn't seen before, his exhaustion replaced by focused energy that carried him through 16-hour days. She helped where she could, researching community development grants and affordable arts programs in other cities, compiling data about underserved neighborhoods in Richmond and the documented benefits of accessible creative spaces. Her dining room table disappeared under spreadsheets and demographic reports, color-coded tabs marking potential funding sources and partnership opportunities. Preston called 3 times that first week, each conversation ending with Dominic deflecting rather than committing. Elena could hear the frustration in his voice when he hung up, the weight of disappointing his brother adding to the already substantial pressure. He thinks I'm being irresponsible, choosing a pipe dream over Clemmy's financial security. Elena looked up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing successful grant applications. What do you think? I think he might be right. The odds of the city council approving this are minimal at best. We'd be competing against established firms with proven track records and political connections. I'm a guy whose business is barely staying afloat, pitching a project his dead wife designed. He dropped into the chair across from her, rubbing his eyes. Maybe Preston's offer is the smart choice after all. Do you believe in this project? That's not the question. It's exactly the question. Do you believe the community needs this? That Annalise's vision was worth pursuing? Dominic's hands fell away from his face, and Elena saw the answer before he spoke it. Yes, I believe it could change lives. Provide opportunities for kids who don't have access to arts education, give local artists affordable space to work and teach, create something beautiful in a neighborhood that's been neglected for decades. I believe in it completely. Then fight for it. Let me help you fight for it. And if it fails, we'll figure out what comes next together. The City Council presentation was scheduled for May 23rd, giving them 3 weeks to prepare. Dominic worked on the architectural renderings and budget projections, while Elena crafted the narrative, interviewing local artists and community leaders about the need for accessible creative spaces. Clemmy contributed drawings of what she imagined the center would look like, cheerful crayon sketches that somehow captured the project's spirit better than any professional rendering. Thea's support came unexpectedly delivered over coffee while Clemmy was at preschool and Dominic was meeting with a structural engineer. She sat across from Elena in a cafe. Neither had suggested, hands wrapped around her mug like she needed the warmth despite the spring temperature. "I owe you an apology for what I said back in March, questioning whether you were ready for this." Elena had almost forgotten about that conversation, or at least had pushed it far enough down that it no longer stung constantly. "You were protecting your son. I understand that. I was protecting him, but I was also wrong. About you, about what you could handle, about what you wanted." Thea's voice carried something Elena had never heard from her before: vulnerability. "I watched Annalise die, slowly watched my son break apart trying to hold everything together. I couldn't bear the thought of him going through that kind of loss again, even a different kind. So I tried to scare you off before anyone got too attached. It didn't work. No, it didn't. And I'm glad." Thea managed a small smile. "Clemmy is happier than I've seen her in years. She talks about you constantly, plans her days around when she'll see you next. And Dominic, he's actually living again instead of just surviving. That's because of you." The words settled something Elena hadn't realized still needed settling. "Thank you for telling me that. There's something else you should know about Preston's offer." Thea's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "He called me last week, asked me to convince Dominic to accept, said the art center idea was Dominic clinging to the past instead of building a future. He thinks Dominic is being selfish, risking Clemmy's stability for sentiment. What do you think? I think Preston has never understood what it means to build something that matters more than profit margins. He sees Dominic's firm as a failing business that needs to be absorbed and streamlined. He doesn't see it as Dominic's heart, Annalise's legacy, the physical manifestation of everything they dreamed together." Thea leaned forward, her voice intense. "I told Preston that if Dominic wants to chase this impossible project, I'll support him. Because watching him passionate about something again is worth more than any quarterly earnings report." The presentation came together in pieces, refined through late nights and early mornings, tested on anyone willing to listen. Elena's sister Rachel drove up from Charlottesville to review their pitch, her professional background in nonprofit management providing valuable perspective on the grant applications. Even her initial skepticism about Dominic had faded once she saw them working together, the easy rhythm of their collaboration revealing depths Rachel hadn't expected. "You're different with him, more grounded, more certain." They were standing in Rachel's hotel room, Dominic downstairs reviewing renderings one final time before the presentation tomorrow. Elena had come up to borrow an adapter cable and found herself staying, accepting the glass of wine her sister offered. "He makes me want to be better. Not different, just more fully myself. That's what good relationships do. They don't complete you, they make you braver about being who you already are." Rachel smiled, the expression carrying approval Elena hadn't realized she'd been seeking. "I'm sorry about Blake. I didn't know he was such a disaster. If you had, I never would have been sitting at that table when Clemmy walked up. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things." The Richmond City Council chambers felt simultaneously too large and too small, rows of seats filled with citizens waiting to present various proposals and grievances. Dominic sat in the front row with Elena beside him, his knee bouncing in nervous rhythm while city council members shuffled papers and checked phones. 4 other architectural firms had already presented that morning, each with slick multimedia presentations and decades of established credibility. When Dominic's name was called, Elena squeezed his hand once before he stood and made his way to the podium. She'd helped him practice this speech dozens of times, knew every pause and emphasis, but watching him deliver it to the actual council members made her heart race. "Council members, my name is Dominic Ashford. I'm here to present a proposal for a community arts center in the North Side neighborhood, a project that began as my late wife's vision and has evolved into something I believe could transform lives." He walked them through Annalise's original research, the documented need for accessible arts education in underserved areas, the economic benefits of creative spaces in struggling neighborhoods. His voice remained steady even when he spoke about Annalise, directly crediting her insights and passion while making clear he'd updated and refined the plans for current realities. Elena had worried the council would dismiss him immediately, write him off as a small-timer playing in waters too deep. But as Dominic presented the renderings, modern design balanced with neighborhood character, flexible spaces that could adapt to community needs, sustainable materials that kept long-term costs manageable, she saw genuine interest on several faces. The questions came rapid fire after his presentation ended. How would they sustain operations after the initial funding ran out? What partnerships had he secured with local arts organizations? How did this compare to the proposal from Riverside Architecture, the much larger firm that had presented earlier? Dominic fielded each question with preparation. Elena had helped him develop, backing every answer with data and documentation. When Councilwoman Torres asked about his firm's financial stability and ability to oversee a project of this scope, he didn't flinch. My firm has faced challenges since my wife's death 3 years ago. I won't pretend otherwise. But those challenges have taught me how to do more with less, how to find creative solutions when traditional approaches fail. This project isn't just professional for me, it's personal. It matters in a way corporate renovations never could. And I'm willing to stake everything on proving that matters. The council moved into closed session after the presentations concluded deliberations that could take hours or days, depending on how contested the decisions became. Dominic and Elena walked along the canal, neither ready to go home and wait by the phone, needing movement to burn off the anxious energy. I think you did everything you could. The presentation was strong. The competition is stronger. Riverside has relationships with half the council members, a track record of completed projects 3 times this size, and funding partnerships I can't begin to match. He picked up a rock and tossed it into the water, watching ripples spread outward. Preston was probably right. This was a nice dream, but dreams don't pay for college tuition. Elena stopped walking, forcing him to turn and face her. Don't do that. Don't decide it's over before you know the outcome. You fought for something that mattered. That counts regardless of what the council decides. Does it? Or did I just waste 3 weeks we could have spent securing actual stability? You showed Clemmy that some things are worth fighting for even when success isn't guaranteed. You honored Annalise's memory by believing her vision deserved to exist. You proved to yourself that you're more than just half of what you used to be. Elena's voice carried absolute certainty. Those things matter, Dominic. Win or lose, they matter. The call came at 7:30 that evening, Councilwoman Torres's assistant, delivering news that hit with unexpected force. The council had voted 4-3 in favor of Dominic's proposal, contingent on his ability to secure matching funds within 90 days and meet specific partnership requirements with established arts organizations. It wasn't a complete victory, the conditions were substantial, but it was a chance. Dominic stood in his kitchen holding the phone long after the call ended, expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. Elena and Clemmy waited, neither daring to ask until he spoke first. They approved it, pending conditions, but they approved it. Clemmy screamed and launched herself at her father, wrapping her arms around his waist with enough force to nearly knock him backward. I knew it. I knew your building was the best one. Can I help paint it? Can we put purple on something? We'll find somewhere to put purple, baby. I promise. Over Clemmy's head, Dominic's eyes found Elena's, and what passed between them needed no words. Gratitude and joy and bone-deep relief all tangled together, the knowledge that this impossible thing might actually happen because she'd believed in it when he couldn't. Later, after Clemmy had finally crashed from excitement and been carried to bed, still chattering about purple paint, Dominic pulled Elena into his arms in the quiet kitchen. I couldn't have done this without you. The research, the preparation, the belief that it was worth trying, that was all you. It was all us. That's what partnership means. He kissed her, then deep and grateful and full of promise, and Elena felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. The woman who'd sat alone at Bellini's 5 months ago, convinced something was fundamentally wrong with her, no longer existed. In her place was someone who'd learned that love wasn't about being perfect or ready, it was about showing up even when you were terrified and choosing to believe in possibilities. The next 90 days became a blur of grant applications and partnership meetings, networking with arts organizations, and wooing potential donors. Dominic's firm stabilized as news of the council approval spread, new clients appearing from unexpected sources drawn by the publicity and the proof that he could deliver ambitious projects. Preston called to offer grudging congratulations, admitting he'd underestimated his brother's determination. June brought Clemmy's kindergarten transition meetings at Riverside Elementary, where Elena worked. The school administrator raised eyebrows when she realized the connection, but policies allowed it as long as Elena wasn't Clemmy's direct teacher. They assigned Clemmy to Mrs. Patterson's class, a veteran educator with a gift for managing energetic children, and Elena found herself looking forward to passing Clemmy in the hallways next year. The spring recital happened on a Thursday evening in mid-May. The elementary school auditorium packed with parents wielding cameras and grandparents claiming the best seats. Clemmy had a small speaking part as a flower in a production about seasons changing, specifically a tulip she'd informed everyone was the most important flower because tulips came first and started everything. Elena sat between Dominic and Thea, acutely aware this was the first school event where she'd been included as family rather than faculty. When Clemmy spotted them in the audience during her entrance, her face lit up with such joy that several people in nearby rows smiled at the obvious connection. During intermission, Thea leaned over and spoke quietly. "She asked me last week if you were going to be her new mommy. I told her that was between you and her father, but she should know that families come in all different shapes, and none of them are wrong." "What did she say to that?" "She said she didn't care what shape it was as long as you were in it." Thea's hand found Elena's and squeezed once. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you are. In it, I mean. You're good for both of them. Good for all of us." July meant Virginia Beach, a long weekend trip that Thea orchestrated with the efficiency of a military operation. She'd rented a house 3 blocks from the ocean front, complete with a porch overlooking the dunes and enough bedrooms that everyone had space. Preston drove up from Atlanta with his wife and teenage son, making it a full family gathering that felt both overwhelming and exactly right. Clemmy spent hours building sandcastles with architectural precision that made Dominic beam with pride, insisting on proper foundation work and structural support, even though the tide would destroy everything by morning. Elena helped her collect shells, sorting them by size and color into elaborate categories that made sense only to a 6-year-old mind. Preston approached Elena on the second evening while Dominic was putting Clemmy to bed and Thea was reading on the porch. They walked along the beach in comfortable silence until he finally spoke. "I was wrong about you. And about the Arts Center. I thought Dominic was being reckless, choosing sentiment over security. But watching him this weekend, seeing how he is with you and Clemmy, he's actually happy. I haven't seen him happy in years. He's doing the work. I'm just along for the ride. Don't sell yourself short. Thea told me how much you contributed to the council presentation, how many hours you put into research and grant applications. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Because I love him." The words came easily now, without the fear that used to accompany such admissions. "And when you love someone, you fight for their dreams, like they're your own." Preston nodded, watching waves crash against the shore. "Annalise would have liked you. She had a thing about collecting strays, people who needed someone to believe in them. That's what she did for Dominic back in college, saw something in him he didn't see in himself, and refused to let him hide from it. I'm not trying to replace her. I know. But you're doing something just as important. You're helping him remember who he was before grief broke him, while also becoming someone new. That's a gift." On their last evening at the beach, after Clemmy had gone to bed and Thea and Preston's family had retired to their rooms, Dominic asked Elena if she wanted to walk. The moon hung low over the water, full and bright enough to paint the waves silver. They walked in silence for a while, shoes dangling from their hands, feet sinking into cool, wet sand with each step. Elena felt the question coming before Dominic spoke. It recognized the nervous energy radiating from him. "I need to tell you something about moving forward." Her heart kicked against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "Okay. I'm not trying to replace what I had with Annalise. I could never do that, and I wouldn't want to. She'll always be Clemmy's mother, always be part of our history." He stopped walking, turning to face her with waves rolling behind him. "But I think there's room in our lives for more love. For you, if you want that." Elena waited, sensing he wasn't finished giving him space to find whatever words he was reaching for. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Not tonight. Because when that happens, I want Clemmy to be part of it. But I am asking you if you'll let us be your family. If you'll take this chance with us, knowing it won't always be easy, and we come with complications and grief that still surfaces sometimes. If you'll build something new with us, instead of trying to fit into what used to be." The answer rose from somewhere deep in Elena's chest, certain and uncomplicated. "Yes, to all of it. Yes." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious he'd been afraid to hope for. They stood there while waves rolled in and the moon watched overhead, and Elena felt every broken piece of her heart click back into place. Not healed by someone else's love, but made whole by her own willingness to be vulnerable to risk, to believe she deserved exactly this. August brought Clemmy's 6th birthday party held at a park with a bouncy castle and face painting and more cupcakes than any group of children could reasonably consume. Elena had helped plan every detail, managing RSVPs and coordinating with vendors, while Dominic stressed over whether they'd ordered enough juice boxes. "It's a birthday party, not a military operation. You clearly haven't witnessed the chaos of 26-year-olds running on sugar and sunshine. Juice box shortages lead to riots." The party proved chaotic but successful. Clemmy running between activities with her face painted like a butterfly, laughter carrying across the park. As parents began collecting their exhausted children and the afternoon wound down, Clemmy found Elena sitting at one of the picnic tables and climbed into her lap without asking. "Did you have fun?" "The best fun ever. This was the best birthday ever in the history of birthdays." Clemmy settled against Elena's chest, her earlier energy finally depleting. Then quietly, "Can I ask you something important?" "Of course, sweetheart. Anything." "Are you going to come to all my birthdays, like every single one, forever and ever?" Elena's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I'd like that very much. If you want me to." "I do want you to. I want you to come to everything forever. Birthdays and Christmas and regular Tuesdays and all the days." Clemmy's small face scrunched up in concentration, working through some complex thought process. "I want you to be my family. Like how Grandma Thea is my family. Can you be my family too?" The question landed with more weight than any proposal could carry. Because this wasn't just about Elena and Dominic anymore, it was about Clemmy choosing her, explicitly asking for this relationship to become permanent and real. Elena looked over Clemmy's head and found Dominic watching them from across the park, his expression revealing he'd known this conversation was coming. Their eyes met, and she saw her own emotions reflected back, hope and fear and overwhelming love, all tangled together. "Yes." Her voice caught, but she pushed through. "I can be yours. I want to be yours." Clemmy's arms wrapped around Elena's neck, squeezing tight. "Good. That's settled then. Now we're a real family." Later, after Clemmy had crashed from sugar overload and Thea had driven her home, Dominic told Elena what his daughter had asked him earlier that week. She wanted to know if it was allowed, if it was okay for her to love you like family, if that meant she was forgetting about her mom. His voice carried the weight of that conversation. "I told her love doesn't work like that hearts don't have limited space where loving someone new means loving someone else less. I told her Annalise would want her to have as many people loving her as possible." "What did she say?" "She said she already loved you like family. She just wanted to make sure I was okay with it." He smiled, but Elena could see moisture in his eyes. "She sees what I see, that you're special, that you're meant to be with us." September meant new beginnings. As Clemmy started kindergarten in Mrs. Patterson's classroom, her purple backpack almost as big as she was, Elena watched from a distance as Dominic walked his daughter to class that first morning. both of them fighting tears they tried to hide from each other. When Clemmy spotted Elena in the hallway, she broke away from her father and ran over for a hug, whispering that she loved her before disappearing into the classroom with the other students. The Arts Center project moved forward with gathering momentum, matching funds secured through a combination of grants and private donations, partnerships formalized with 3 major arts organizations willing to provide programming. Dominic hired 2 new staff members to help manage the expanded workload, young architects hungry for meaningful projects who brought fresh energy to the firm. Elena watched him transform over those months, grief still present but no longer defining him, building something new while honoring what came before. He spoke about Annalise more easily now, sharing stories with Clemmy about her mother that made them both laugh and cry. The difference was that the stories no longer felt like endings, they felt like foundations for what came next. October arrived with crisp air and leaves beginning to turn the city, preparing for fall. Dominic made a reservation at Bellini's, requesting table 7 specifically, and told Elena to wear something nice. She knew what was coming before he confirmed it, had known since that conversation on the beach in July, but the certainty didn't diminish the butterflies in her stomach. She chose the same emerald dress she'd worn Christmas Eve, the one she'd been wearing when Clemmy had approached her table. It felt right closing this particular circle with intention and memory. Dominic was already seated when she arrived, wearing the navy suit he'd worn to the city council presentation, his expression carrying nervous anticipation that reminded her of their first coffee date, but this time his hands were steady when he stood to greet her. They ordered wine and breadsticks, falling into comfortable conversation about Clemmy's adjustment to kindergarten and the latest developments with the Arts Center. Anyone watching would have seen an established couple enjoying dinner easy with each other in the way that comes from shared history and genuine affection. After their entrees arrived and they'd eaten enough to satisfy the waiter's hovering concern, Dominic reached across the table and took Elena's hand. "Do you remember this place?" She smiled, playing along. "I seem to recall it vaguely." "Something about breadsticks. This is where you were sitting alone and heartbroken because someone who didn't deserve you failed to recognize what he was walking away from. This is where my daughter, who was braver than I've ever been, walked up to you and asked if you were okay." His thumb traced circles against her palm. "This is where everything changed." Elena felt tears building but didn't try to stop them. It was a good change. The best change. These past 10 months with you have been, I don't have words adequate to describe what you've meant to me. To us. He paused, and Elena saw him gathering courage. "You've been patient with me while I figured out how to open my heart again. You've been incredible with Clemmy, loving her without trying to erase her mother's memory. You've believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, pushed me to fight for things that mattered instead of settling for safe mediocrity." He stood then, not kneeling yet, but pulling Elena gently to her feet, holding both her hands in his. Around them the restaurant continued its normal rhythm. Families and couples lost in their own conversations, but Elena felt like they existed in a bubble where only the 2 of them mattered. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. I mean, I am. But there's something else first." He smiled at her confusion. "I want to do this right, and doing it right means having Clemmy here when I ask the actual question. But what I'm asking now is, will you be part of our family? Will you let us be part of yours? Will you take this chance with us, knowing we come with complications and history and a 6-year-old who has absolutely no boundaries?" Elena laughed through tears, the sound carrying joy she'd never quite managed before. "Yes, yes to all of it. Then the rest is just details we'll figure out together." He kissed her there in the middle of Bellini's in front of table 7, where this entire impossible journey had started, and Elena tasted salt from her own tears mixed with wine and the particular flavor of promises being made and kept. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic's phone was already ringing. Thea's name on the screen, right on schedule. He answered on speaker. "Did you ask her?" "What did she say?" Before Dominic could respond, Clemmy's voice erupted in the background, barely intelligible through excitement. "Daddy, did Miss Elena say yes? Is she going to be my family forever now? Can I talk to her, please, please, please?" Dominic handed Elena the phone and she pressed it to her ear while trying to control her voice enough to speak. "Hi, Clemmy. Hi, Daddy said you said yes. Is that true? You're going to be my family forever and ever." "It's true, sweetheart. I said yes." The squeal that followed was loud enough that several nearby tables turned to look. In the background, Elena could hear Thea laughing and trying to calm Clemmy down without much success. "This is the best day ever. Even better than my birthday. Even better than when I got my purple bicycle. Can we have celebration pancakes tomorrow with chocolate chips? And can you come? Please say you'll come." "I'll be there, I promise. Best day ever." They talked for a few more minutes. Clemmy's excitement gradually settling into questions about when the actual wedding would be and whether she could be the flower girl and if they could get a dog now. Dominic fielded each question with practiced patience while Elena watched him with her heart so full it felt like it might burst. After they hung up, he pulled something from his jacket pocket. Not a ring that would come later with Clemmy present, but a key on a simple chain. "I had this made last week. It's to our house. Your house now if you want it to be. I know we should probably talk about logistics and timing and all the practical details, but I'm hoping you'll say yes to this too." Elena took the key, its weight solid and real in her palm, a physical manifestation of doors opening, of being invited into spaces she'd only been visiting before, of home expanding to include her in permanent, tangible ways. "I'd like that, very much." They stayed at Bellini's for another hour making plans and dreaming about futures that now felt possible instead of terrifying. The official proposal would come next weekend, Dominic explained. He'd already arranged everything with Thea's help, a family dinner where Clemmy would be part of, asking Elena to marry them to make it clear this was all three of them choosing each other. But sitting there at table 7, Elena already knew her answer. Had known it since that night in April when Clemmy had woken up terrified, and Elena had realized she couldn't walk away even when it was hard. Had known it since the beach in July when Dominic had asked if she'd take a chance on them. Had known it perhaps since Christmas Eve when a brave little girl had approached a stranger and asked if she was okay. As they walked to their cars, Dominic's hand warm in hers, Elena thought about the woman she'd been 10 months ago. Sitting alone in this same restaurant, convinced something was fundamentally wrong with her, unable to imagine how one terrible night could transform into the beginning of everything beautiful. She'd learned that the darkest moments often came right before the light broke through. That sometimes you had to sit alone at a table heartbroken and humiliated before you could be found by the people who would change your entire world. That love wasn't about being perfect or ready, it was about being brave enough to show up even when you were terrified and believing that some chances were worth taking. The next Saturday, Dominic's entire family gathered at his house for what Clemmy had been told was a special dinner. She'd spent the afternoon helping Thea make lasagna and setting the table with meticulous care, insisting everything had to be perfect, even though she didn't know why. When Elena arrived, Clemmy dragged her into the living room where Dominic stood waiting, looking nervous in a way that made Elena love him even more. Preston and his family occupied the couch. Thea stood near the fireplace, and everyone was watching with barely contained anticipation. "Okay, baby." Dominic crouched down to Clemmy's level. "Remember what we talked about? About asking Miss Elena something very important?" Clemmy nodded solemnly, then turned to Elena with an expression far too serious for a 6-year-old. "Miss Elena, me and Daddy have a question. A really, really important one." She reached out and took Elena's hand, then grabbed her father's, linking all three of them together. "We want to know if you'll marry us. Not just Daddy, but me too. Because we want to be a forever family with you in it always. Will you say yes?" Dominic pulled a ring box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple band with 3 small stones, emerald, sapphire, and diamond. "The emerald is for you, the sapphire for Clemmy, and the diamond for us, for the family we're choosing to build together." Elena dropped to her knees so she was level with Clemmy, taking the little girl's face in her hands. "Yes, I will marry both of you. I would be honored to be your forever family." Clemmy launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Elena's neck with enough force to nearly knock them both over. Over her wild curls, Elena met Dominic's eyes, and saw every emotion she felt reflected back, joy and relief and overwhelming gratitude that they'd found each other, despite every reason they shouldn't have. When Clemmy finally released her grip, Dominic slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, his hands shaking slightly. "I love you. We both love you. And I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that second chances are real. I love you too, both of you." Elena pulled them both close, feeling Clemmy's small body pressed against her chest and Dominic's arms encircling them both. More than I knew it was possible to love anything. The celebration that followed involved Thea's lasagna and too much wine, and Clemmy announcing to everyone within earshot that she was getting a new mommy and also maybe a dog if she kept being really good. Preston made a toast about being wrong and being happy about it. Thea cried and pretended she wasn't dabbing at her eyes while insisting something was just in her contact lens. Later, after everyone had gone home and Clemmy had been tucked into bed still chattering about wedding plans, Elena and Dominic sat on his porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "1 year ago I was sitting in a restaurant alone, convinced I was unlovable. Now I'm here engaged to an incredible man with an amazing daughter, planning a future I never let myself imagine." Elena's voice caught, but she pushed through. "How did this happen?" "A brave little girl saw someone who needed kindness and decided to offer it. And you were brave enough to accept it." Dominic's arm tightened around her shoulders. "The rest was just us choosing each other over and over until it became permanent." Elena thought about all the choices that had led here. Blake's cruelty that had left her at that table. Clemmy's fearlessness in approaching a stranger. Dominic's willingness to let someone new into his carefully constructed life. Her own decision to stay instead of running when things got complicated. Every choice building on the last until they'd created something neither could have planned but both desperately needed. "Do you think Annalise would approve of us, I mean?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I think she'd be happy Clemmy has someone else to love her. That I found someone who makes me want to keep building instead of just maintaining. That we're honoring what she started with the Arts Center while also creating something new." He kissed the top of Elena's head. "She used to say that love multiplies instead of dividing. That opening your heart to someone doesn't diminish what you felt before, it just expands your capacity for feeling. I think she'd see you as proof she was right." They sat in comfortable silence as night settled fully, the sounds of the neighborhood drifting around them. Somewhere a dog barked, a car door slammed, children squealed in a distant yard. Ordinary sounds of ordinary lives made extraordinary by the people you chose to share them with. Christmas Eve arrived again, 1 full year since Elena and Dominic had first met, bringing with it the sharp cold and clear skies that made Richmond beautiful. They'd planned to spend the evening at Bellini's, a family tradition now honoring where everything started, and Clemmy had been vibrating with excitement all day. Table 7 was waiting for them when they arrived, decorated with fresh flowers and a reserved sign that made Clemmy beam with importance. Thea joined them along with Preston's family, who'd driven up from Atlanta specifically for this. The restaurant was packed with other families celebrating, children running between tables, while parents tried to maintain order, the air thick with garlic and tomato sauce and joy. After they'd ordered and breadsticks had been delivered to immediate acclaim from Clemmy, Dominic stood and raised his glass. 1 year ago tonight I was sitting at this table with my daughter, both of us going through the motions of celebrating while feeling the absence of someone we'd lost. And then a beautiful woman in an emerald dress was abandoned by someone who didn't deserve her, and my brave daughter decided to do something about it." He looked at Elena, and she saw everything they'd been through reflected in his expression. "You walked into our broken family and didn't try to fix us. You just loved us, as we were complicated grief and career struggles and boundaryless children included. You helped me remember who I was before loss broke me while also becoming someone new. You gave Clemmy another person to love her unconditionally. You gave both of us hope when we'd forgotten what that felt like." Elena felt tears threatening but smiled through them. Around the table everyone was watching Thea dabbing at her eyes, Preston grinning, Clemmy practically bouncing in her seat. So here's to second chances, to brave little girls who approach strangers, to tables that hold magic, to families built by choice instead of just blood, and to Elena, who proved that sometimes the worst nights lead to the best lives. They clinked glasses, and Clemmy insisted on adding her own toast. And here's to purple bicycles and celebration pancakes and dogs we might get someday, and Miss Elena being our family forever and ever. The meal stretched into hours, conversation flowing easily between courses, laughter echoing off the brick walls. At one point, Elena excused herself to use the restroom, and on her way back she noticed a woman sitting alone at a corner table, tears streaming down her face, while families celebrated around her. The woman looked lost, heartbroken, exactly how Elena had felt 1 year ago. She almost kept walking, almost returned to her table where her family waited, where joy and love and belonging were guaranteed. But Clemmy's voice echoed in her memory. Nobody should be sad all by themselves. And Elena found her feet changing direction. "Excuse me, are you okay?" The woman looked up, startled, and Elena saw her own past reflected in those tear-stained eyes. "I'm fine, thank you." But Elena recognized that particular kind of fine, the one that meant anything but. She glanced back at her table where Dominic was watching, understanding on his face. He nodded once, permission and encouragement combined. "I was sitting alone here last Christmas Eve, crying into my wine after a terrible blind date, and a little girl walked up to me and asked if I was okay. It changed my entire life." Elena gestured toward her table where Clemmy was waving enthusiastically. "If you'd like some company, you're welcome to join us. We have extra breadsticks, and my daughter insists they're the best in the whole wide world." The woman hesitated, clearly weighing social awkwardness against loneliness, and Elena saw the exact moment she made her choice. The same choice Elena had made 1 year ago when she'd said yes to an impossible invitation. "I'd like that. Thank you." As they walked back to table 7 together, Clemmy already making room and launching into introductions, Elena caught Dominic's eye and felt her heart expand. This was what love did. It multiplied, creating ripples that touched people you'd never expected to reach. It taught you that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was ask a stranger if they were okay, and the second bravest thing was accepting help when offered. The night ended with hugs and promises to do this again. Next year, the restaurant staff patiently waiting for them to finish their goodbyes. As Elena and Dominic walked to their car, Clemmy between them holding both their hands, she looked back at Bellini's glowing warmly against the December night. "Thank you." She wasn't sure if she was talking to Dominic or the universe or that brave little girl who'd approached a stranger, but it didn't matter. The gratitude was big enough to encompass everything. For what? For finding me. For letting me find you. For proving that sometimes the worst moments are actually doorways to something better. Dominic stopped walking and pulled her close, Clemmy protesting mildly about being squished between them but not pulling away. "You found us just as much as we found you. That's what family is, choosing each other and then choosing each other again every single day." They stood there in the parking lot, wrapped in each other's arms under Christmas lights, and Elena understood with perfect clarity that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because some cosmic plan had predetermined it, but because she'd been brave enough to say yes when a little girl offered hope. Because she'd stayed when it got complicated. Because she'd chosen love even when it meant risking her heart one more time. Sometimes the worst Christmas Eve becomes the beginning of your best story. Sometimes a broken heart is just making room for something bigger. Sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to ask if you're okay, and one person brave enough to admit you're not. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the answer to that simple question changes 3 lives forever.